Hola, buenos días. Soy Helena López del Hierro, soy la directora del Museo del Traje. Bienvenidos a estas jornadas de análisis de la moda de autor en España y modelos internacionales, que organiza el Ministerio de Cultura y Deporte a través de la Dirección General de Industrias Culturales junto con la Asociación de Creadores de Moda de España, y en las que vamos a analizar a lo largo de esta jornada y media las casuísticas que definen el desarrollo identitario y económico de la moda de autor en España, a la vez que nos miramos en el espejo de los principales modelos, de los exitosos principales modelos internacionales de nuestro entorno. Bien, el Museo del Traje, como saben, es un museo dedicado a la moda como patrimonio cultural. Hace ya muchos años que decidimos que queríamos ser también uno de los canales de difusión y de conocimiento, de proyección del conocimiento de la moda española. Y por eso hoy estamos encantados de convertirnos en este lugar de acogida, en este punto de encuentro de tantos profesionales de la moda, del emprendimiento, de la cultura y de la formación en moda, ¿no? Espero que se sientan como en su casa y ese es nuestro objetivo. Para inaugurar estas jornadas tenemos con nosotros al secretario general de Cultura del Ministerio de Cultura y Deporte, Víctor Francos, y después continuará con la presentación el presidente de la Asociación de Creadores de Moda de España, Modesto Lomba. Muchas gracias y cuando quiera, secretario.
Buenos días. Estábamos diciendo al entrar que es un poquito pronto, ¿no? Bueno, desde el Ministerio de Cultura y Deporte sabéis que hemos apostado decididamente por esta semana de la moda de autor, en la que se inscriben las jornadas de análisis de la moda de autor que ahora y que estamos inaugurando en estos momentos. En estas jornadas, organizadas por nuestro Ministerio, en colaboración con la Asociación de Creadores de Moda de España, vamos a contar con las ideas y experiencias de muy destacados representantes españoles e internacionales del sector de la moda de autor. A todos ellos y a ellas, a todos vosotros y vosotras, os doy una cálida bienvenida y mi sincero agradecimiento por haber aceptado la invitación de participar en ellas. El apoyo expreso del Ministerio a un sector tan crucial como el de la moda se manifiesta también en el Premio Nacional de la Moda, que es una manera de reconocer el valor social y cultural de los creadores en todas sus facetas y especialmente su aportación a la cultura española y a la consolidación de nuestras industrias culturales. Precisamente el lunes pasado, como saben, el Premio Nacional de la Moda fue concedido a Ángel Schlesser y aprovecho la ocasión, por cierto, para felicitarle públicamente, tanto por su trayectoria artística como creador de una estética internacionalmente muy reconocible, como por su espíritu emprendedor, porque la moda también es emprender, sobre todo es emprender. En el Ministerio de Cultura y Deporte sabemos muy bien que la moda es sin duda uno de los sectores más dinámicos y estratégicos dentro de las industrias culturales y uno de los de mayor significación para el desarrollo económico general y el incremento del empleo. En los datos del Informe Económico de la Moda del 2021 se refleja el impacto económico que ha supuesto en los últimos 2 años la pandemia en el sector de la moda. Todas las industrias creativas se han visto afectadas, eso es una evidencia, pero el propio dinamismo del sector hizo que la caída fuese quizá más abrupta que en otros sectores que también se habían visto afectados. Lógicamente, la reducción de la vida social y la repercusión de la pandemia en los cierres y ajustes comerciales se vieron reflejados en vuestra industria, que es la nuestra. Pero ese mismo informe pone también de manifiesto cómo la moda muestra ya claros signos de recuperación y, francamente, alentadores. La capacidad de reacción, la resistencia y la fortaleza de la moda a la hora de generar valor permite inaugurar un crecimiento relativamente rápido del sector. Esperemos que así sea. La adaptación de la moda a las circunstancias cambiantes es un elemento clave entre sus muchas potencialidades para superar los obstáculos y recuperar su papel dinamizador de las exportaciones, la producción y el empleo. Algunas de las marcas españolas más valiosas y reconocidas internacionalmente son marcas de moda. Esta vertiente económica de la moda es perfectamente compatible con su consideración como sector cultural. Su encaje dentro de las industrias culturales nos permite verla como una disciplina artística, a la vez que como una fuerza motriz de nuestra economía. La moda es un motor económico de primer orden, pero también forma parte esencial de nuestra identidad cultural, no solo en el ámbito nacional, sino también de cara al exterior. Ahora que hablamos tanto de internacionalizar, de la marca España, para fortalecer aún más ese papel y contribuir a mejorar las cotas de creatividad y producción, estas jornadas de análisis de la moda de autor nos parecen casi imprescindibles, pues gracias a las reflexiones que en ellas se suscitan, tomará forma la estrategia de la moda de autor. No quisiera dejar de agradecer encarecidamente la colaboración por parte de colectivos como la Asociación de Creadores de Moda de España, ACME, que realizan una labor crucial en la vertebración del sector y ayudan a proyectar la moda española en los mercados globales y en las plataformas de reconocimiento internacionales. La colaboración del Ministerio con ACME ha hecho posible hoy reunir en este Museo del Traje a las grandes personalidades internacionales de la creatividad de la moda, incluyendo los y las profesionales y expertos españoles más destacados del sector. Voy acabando. Con la celebración de estas jornadas damos cumplimiento al acuerdo tomado por la Mesa de Trabajo de la Moda de Autor, órgano constituido en el marco de la Conferencia Sectorial de Cultura, que celebró su primera sesión de trabajo en Toledo el pasado mes de noviembre, con la participación del propio ministro de Cultura. En dicha sesión de la Mesa de Trabajo de la Moda de Autor, administraciones y agentes del sector nos marcamos como objetivo estratégico promover la internacionalización de la moda española, favoreciendo la comunicación de sus profesionales y empresas, con las personalidades y empresas internacionales más destacadas de países como Francia, Italia o el Reino Unido. Con estas jornadas damos hoy un paso decisivo hacia adelante de esos objetivos. Solamente deciros que esperamos y espero personalmente que las reflexiones e intercambios que tengáis en estos 2 intensos días resulten fructíferos y nos permitan seguir avanzando en el fortalecimiento del sector, tanto en el plano creativo como en el económico. Lo hemos pasado muy mal todos con la pandemia. Ahora es momento de salir adelante. La moda, aparte de cultura, como os he dicho en el discurso, en la inauguración, es uno de los sectores estratégicos para la internacionalización de España y, por lo tanto, os animamos a que seáis atrevidos, a que seáis valientes, a que seáis exigentes con nosotros, que somos el Ministerio de referencia, a que nos pidáis, nosotros os pediremos también, no os preocupéis, y, por lo tanto, a que colaboremos juntos para que este sector, que es un sector reconocido mundialmente, la moda española, sea más que nunca un sector dinámico, tanto a nivel cultural como económico. Gracias.
Buenos días a todos. Desde la Asociación de Creadores de Moda España, solo quiero dar las gracias al Ministerio de Cultura y Deporte, Víctor, Adriana, muchas gracias por vuestro apoyo, al Museo del Traje por acoger estas jornadas. Helena, muchísimas gracias. Y en nombre de los diseñadores quiero dar las gracias a todos los ponentes que van a participar en estas jornadas nacionales, ponentes nacionales e internacionales. Estas jornadas esperamos que nos permitan recoger una serie de conclusiones para finalizar ese plan del plan sectorial para la moda de autor. Agradecer también a todo el equipo humano que ha hecho posibles estas jornadas, Pepa Bueno, nuestra directora, a la cabeza de todo el equipo, y agradecer vuestra presencia también a todos los que nos acompañáis. Muchas gracias.
Buenos días, soy Pepa Bueno, la directora de la Asociación de Creadores de Moda de España. Es para mí un placer presentar esta primera charla en la que se va a reflexionar sobre el modelo francés. Van a dialogar Eugenia de la Torriente y Pascal Morand. Eugenia es actualmente directora adjunta del diario El País. En 2001 se incorporó a la redacción de este periódico, donde trabajó hasta noviembre de 2014 y fue redactora jefe del País semanal y crítica de moda, entre otros cargos. Ha dirigido la revista Harper's Bazaar y Vogue España y es autora de libros como La elegancia masculina y Puig, 100 años de una empresa familiar. Pascal Morand es presidente ejecutivo de la Federación de la Alta Costura y de la Moda Francesa, es también profesor emérito de la Escuela Superior de Comercio de París y miembro de la Academia Francesa de Tecnología. Ha sido decano del Instituto Francés de la Moda del año 87 al 2006 y director adjunto de Comercio e Industria Paris-Île-de-France entre el 13 y el 15. Pascal Morand fue también consejero de la industria textil de Marruecos y ha llevado a cabo diferentes acciones internacionales de innovación. Ha escrito numerosos artículos y publicaciones relacionadas con la innovación, el diseño, la economía y la cultura. Por favor.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Esta charla se desarrollará en inglés, en atención a nuestro invitado. Thank you, Monsieur Morand, for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
It's a real honor to have you with us today. I'm really sure that we are going to learn a lot of your experience and knowledge. I would like to start by giving a little bit of a landscape of what the French model and industry is today. So the French fashion industry is possibly, if Capasa is not mad, if we say this, the strongest in the world. And the French brand and company are, well, a reference for the whole system. I think that it's safe to say that Paris was for sure the home of the golden age of the couture on the 50s, but the French industry managed to turn this artisan system into a very healthy industrial one in the 60s with Pret-a-Porter. And nowadays, French fashion generates 150,000 million euros in sales per year and is responsible for 1 million jobs in the country. This means a substantial part of the French GDP. And, well, those are the figures that are provided by the Federation that you've been executive president since 2015. And, well, the Federation, for everyone to understand, around 100 members. That includes some of the most prestigious houses and designers in the world. And I think that it's a good way to put it, that it has a clear focus on the combination between creativity and traditional know-how, both aspects very well expressed by Haute Couture itself. It has 3 chambers, which is Haute Couture, Women, and Men's. And, well, you, before joining as president, you have had an extensive academic career, and you have a real experience on education and leading different universities too. So you're bringing to the table a lot of different backgrounds, but all of them always connected with fashion. And so my first question to start would be, do you think there's a common thread between the French cultural exception that works so well for, let's say, cinema, and the relevance that French fashion has on the global landscape?
Well, I think there are, of course, some links, but it's also very much, I would say, humanistic tradition and culture, which applies very well to France, but not only to France, also to Italy in different way, but also with many common aspects. And I could include, of course, and I can include Spain and other European-like countries. But let's say the 3 countries have the common Latin roots. But I could say that one important characteristic is that we are French. This is something which cannot be denied. But in a way, we are French and also not French. What I mean by that is that since the very beginning, Paris has been extremely international in fashion. And you mentioned what happened with the ready-to-wear, the prêt-à-porter of the couturier and of the designers, which developed in the 60s, and especially with the 70s. By the way, two of the three chambers were created at that time in 1973, and then the first fashion weeks. In our case, Couture Week, it existed before, but it started in 1974. But I tell you something. Pierre Berger, who was the founder with Yves Saint Laurent of Yves Saint Laurent, and also the founder and the president of the French Fashion Institute, and I had the chance to work with him during 20 years when I was the director and dean of IFM, French Fashion Institute. He often said that what happened in Paris with fashion and international designer has been the continuation of, let's say, the school of art, not the school in terms of education, but in terms of thought and activities between the two world wars, and I could add before World War I. I mean, artists gathering in Paris for some reasons, because they were attracted somehow by this let's say, artistic and aesthetic power in Paris, and also just when the political circumstances in different cases, like for Cristobal, Balenciaga, just like civil wars and civil war just came to Paris. But even if we go back a little bit earlier, Le Worth, who invented haute couture, was English, and he started in Paris. So of course that doesn't mean that Paris is the only like international city. There are others which have a big role, like Milan, like Madrid, like London, and other cities outside of Europe. But in that case, I think this is an important point. That's the first point I wanted to emphasize. And in our case, we have 110 members in our federation, but the characteristic of our federation is to be very selective and very international, because 50% of our members are French brands, and 50% are not French brands. And that is also reflected in the Fashion Weeks, and we can get back to that. But the common point of our federation, there are other professional organizations in France too, but let's say the main point is exactly what you say. It is very much focused on creativity and know-how. And I could say almost all of them are led by, through like a binomial head. There is a manager and a designer or artistic director or creator, and that's one of the key points. In a nutshell, to start.
It's interesting what you just touched. There are, I believe, around 300 shows a year in Paris, and 50% on the official calendar, as you were saying, are not French. So how is this dialogue between the French houses and the international ones? What each of them bring to the table for Paris to become such a powerhouse as in the fashion world?
Well, when a brand, we have our members and we have also guests in the fashion shows, as you know so well. We have these two, let's say, categories, and when the committee is like selecting applications, it works like in the academic life. I thought I would be over with academia, but in fact, it's not the same words, not the same vocabulary, but it looks like very much. I mean, the committees, with also international journalists and buyers, just evaluate the creative power. It's always very difficult to give an idea, an opinion of the creative power, but there is a kind of consensus then, And then what matters, what gathers, is very much this notion, the creativity. An important point also is that there is, of course, a strong link between the designers and also manufacturing, and for textiles and for clothing, etc., and also leather goods. But in this case, this is very much European. And we have like a strong manufacturing like industry for designers brands, but it's even, I would say, stronger in Italy. And this is true also for textiles. So that means it's very European, and that is very important. So the point is that everything in what we do is creativity driven. And then the question is, we can get back to that, does that mean it is artistic, and what does that mean? But this is let's say, the key point. And then the whole challenge is to build up and to keep on innovating and developing an ecosystem, a powerful ecosystem which has a gravity center, which is creativity. It works for other industries, not in fashion. A number of industries. In fact, I don't see an industry for which creativity is not essential today. But in this case, this is very important. This is crucial, and also in this ecosystem, there's also like the importance of, let's say, museums and institutions. It's part of the whole story, because the designers and the artistic directors are very much attracted by that. This is their planet, and this is what inspired them. Beside all the societal move that they can also anticipate, this is very much what gathered them, and the dialogue that they can have even between each other sometimes.
Can you explain to us, that we are here in Spain, what sort of role fashion plays in the French culture in general, what consideration and relevance fashion has in the whole ecosystem of French culture?
Well, fashion is, as it was said, fashion is both is a creative industry, clearly, is a cultural and creative industry, and in the French case. Because, I mean, creative and cultural industries represent a whole set of activities, but in the French case, fashion is the most important. Also, of course, like the cinema mentioned, and the music industry plays also an important role, and some others. We could talk about other things, and media, and architecture, and so on, etc. But I would say this is the most important. The leadership in that case with the power is very much led by fashion in terms of figures, and the point is that it is in between strictly economic as an economic sector. And on the other side, at the center, which is also an applied art. There's always the thing that fashion is not an art by itself, but it becomes an art when it is made by an artist.
That was a quote by Pierre Roger.
Exactly.
He used to say a lot.
Exactly, I say that, and I will not refer again, but that this is, and Yves Saint Laurent said also that fashion needs an art to express itself, needs an artist to express himself or herself. So that is important. But the point, if we talk in terms of, let's say, business, concept, the idea is that the fashion industry, the creative fashion is by definition creativity driven. And the consumer is important. Of course, the consumer is important. I hated the business school. I'm going to get back to this because it's also concerned the school that I was the dean of during several years. I'm still a professor, an emeritus professor, as also a campus and campus in Madrid. But you know, that implies many things. What does that mean to be, in terms of marketing, to be creativity-driven and not consumer-driven? You know, consumer-driven means being obsessed by the consumer, which is very important when you are in mass market, extremely important. But when you are not in the mass market, and when you give the bigger importance to creativity, it has implications, and that has been also a key factor for the development of brands and of fashion brands and luxury groups, which play also, of course, a big role in this ecosystem. The most important thing, let's say in the Paris environment, the most important thing is that you have very powerful brands and groups who support of course the Paris scene, because this is their city. Then they can do many things all over the world, and also young brands and emerging brands or smaller brands, which can be French or not French. That's not the point. But to set up, to constitute a whole ecosystem, which I would say is democratic. And you know the official calendar very well. The official calendar is something, I mean, for people who are outside of fashion, they cannot imagine which kind of complexity. I mean, I think the time we will have an efficient artificial intelligence to manage official calendar is far from being here. It's very complex, but this is the challenge. This is how we promote, we want, and we witness, I would say, the democratic system of including a common respect and embodiment of diversity and of the diversity of brands, and the fact of being different, of having different type of creativity. That is very important.
Yeah, that was an interesting point that I wanted to touch also. I mean, in French fashion, you have some of the biggest luxury groups, LVMH, carrying some of the biggest luxury houses like Chanel or Hermes. How do you combine the needs and the demands of those giants with the ones of upcoming independent designers, Belgian designers, Japanese designers, or French designers, but really, you know, small and upcoming? I mean, there's so different worlds, no?
It has always been so important. You know, it started in the 70s. Myself, I arrived in fashion, to put that in these words, like in the 80s, and some years before, not much before, the Japanese brands came, and that was a big move when Yohji Yamamoto and Ray and Comme des Garçons and Issey Miyake were the first one in the 70s. So it illustrates the difference. And we also had great like brands and international brands also from other countries, and which were attracted by Paris. I have some examples in head, of course, and great ones. But that has been always natural, because it has been always consubstantial to the situation of Paris. And for instance, also last year, we all the cities, fashion capitals, we want to attract also. We want also to do so that the young emerging brands coming from all over the world are not prevented by financial constraints just to come. So we set up a fund to help that, and to help that brands in a very concrete, not big amounts, but just to do so that they can make it.
And where do these funds come from?
Well, for brands which are settled in Paris, we have let's say a fund which is linked to the public sphere, a committee of development. But this is for young brands which come to Paris, But then we also have we have set up a specific fund for brands which are not settled in Paris, because this committee couldn't find, being funded by a tax, it needed, had its limits. So we had to do that beyond, and that has been financed by the brand themselves and by the groups.
So the big groups give money so that the small companies can come to Paris, to put it very...
Yeah, it's true, I think, but I think it, you see, and then the question is, it's difficult to say if it's the optimal amount and if things could be do in a better way, or if it's even beyond what we could expect. But let's say, globally, this is the philosophy of the ecosystem, and this is what we discuss regularly. One of the things we can talk about in the executive committee of the federation, but there is always this, and you know, I'm executive president. Ralph Toledano is president, and he was elected in 2014, and this idea of having building up, developing a house of creativity, création, was always the key thing. And then, of course, we have the couture. We have couture and haute couture and guests which are not haute couture, but etc., which is also another part. I didn't mention that, but of course, it's another part of a huge tradition which started with words, we developed with Paul Poiret, etc., and which had some of difficulties, maybe in the late 90s or something, but which, although Dior and Chanel were always like successful, but which is now having in the last year had a kind of a relaunch, because, you know, keep on developing, I would say, because like personalization and how in a digital society is getting even more important. So there is this balance with the 6 moments that we have. And then, of course, in the case of the federation, there are a number of things that the members, let's say, mutualize, but things that they keep themselves, which is quite normal. And we work, we work also with the expertise of the team, the federation, and also continuously with the members on very important topics that I would say mutualized, or on which there are many exchanges, including sustainable development, including digital matters, which what we did for the platform, for instance, for the Fashion Week, etc.
It's interesting what you say about the haute couture. There was this moment that the haute couture calendar was kind of shrinking, because it seemed that nobody was, you know, interested in haute couture. But then it became, because it was less crowded, also a platform for maybe younger or smaller designers to be seen. And how did the roles to be part of that calendar change in order to facilitate that? You
know, there is this big thing I just mentioned, and I can emphasize that, which is that in the society and the economy in which we live, the notion of uniqueness and of personalization and of crafts and art and crafts, and it's getting more important as a kind of compensation somehow. This is works in any activities, including like a design and lifestyle more globally. But let's say this is more general. And couture and haute couture is sort of just illustrating the in an absolute way this deep move, which is extremely modern. In a way, you can have for designers' brands, the series are small. It can be dozens or hundreds of like pieces and so on. Even when you have big amounts and big turnover, and more for knitwear, jersey and knitwear. But in the case of couture, it's uniqueness, and we have also like some brands or designers who are interested to be more in a couture perspective than to develop like ready-to-wear, which implies many things also in terms of communication, in terms of developments. what is interesting now is that you have different type of business business models, and that is, and I would say, the sanitary crisis has brought difficulties, but in a way, when you have difficult situation, it's a factor for innovating and transforming, and this includes also for this matters also for young brands and so on.
What is the current situation? How was, I mean, regarding the pandemic, how was the French industry impacted, and how is it doing now, 2 years after?
The brands, it depends on the big ones and the international exposure. For the big brands and luxury brands, the situation has been complicated in the beginning, but then there was also the Asian market and the Chinese market, which was absolutely booming. And then, of course, the situation is different now, and if you see, but even now, I mean, it depends on the cases. And then the American brands, the American market was very much booming a little bit later. So at the global level, there has been a kind of regulation, and the houses, the big houses, have been extremely innovative. There's a lot of competence and knowledge, and this is something which strikes me when I compare, with other industries, manufacturing and banking and services. There's a lot of knowledge in these brands and a way of adapting also very quickly. I think the French Fashion Institute, in terms of, not because they were the director of the deal, but in terms of fashion management, has brought a lot, also has contributed to that. Then it was also more difficult for younger brands, but once again it depends. But now the things are moving ahead. And also what we did in our case, because we are a professional organization and we have, let's say, a large events agency, somehow the equivalent, and to maintain that, what we did very quickly was to launch.
This is us?
Somebody may be sleeping somewhere. You can, I don't know. I don't know, I'm just kidding. And some animal, maybe.
I think it's us.
Maybe a ghost. We launched very quickly like this online fashion weekend platform, and for which we just kept on keeping the same principle of the calendar and selectivity and visibility, and I can develop that. That was very important. I also want to say something with the European dimension and project, that it is like a strong field and an important field and important of the fact of cooperating. And I don't say that because Carlo is here, but with the camera and the federation, we work. I can say a lot with each other on very important matters which overcome and which, like mentioned, sustainability. We just had even a small conversation this morning about that, a common project, and there are numerous subjects on which we work like with each other, and of course we talk. This is also like more global, and we talk, of course, with Caroline and British Fashion Council and with the CFDA and Stephen Kolb and the other stakeholders, but we work very much, and we have a common structure because it's also a professional organization, and with also members and brands and etc. So
one of the biggest things happening during the pandemic, as you were saying, were those digital fashion weeks or digital alternatives or whatever you want to call it. Do you think they work?
Yeah, we are very happy with that. See, when we launched that, we did that very quickly, and we partnered with the tech company, which is Launchmetrics, who had some public support, but not much, which gave a leverage effect. And we were just like with the team, like in a startup spirit, developing that and just giving all freedom. We know we decreased the freedom that we have given in the first weeks in 2020, 2 years ago, to the brands and creative videos, and so we discussed that with the members. That was, we started with menswear, and we had an assembly of menswear brands, and the big ones, the smaller ones, and all of them, and all of us said, okay, let's do something with each other. At that time, the chair, the president of the menswear chamber within the federation, was Séverine Merle, the CEO of Céline, and we worked, I mean, the members, the experts, the team, and then we partnered, and we launched that platform. But at the same time, I mean, we knew that we were becoming some kind of media, because in the past, before, we were sort of discreet, like a B2B discreet organization, not making much noise, you see. And that had to change. We are, and I mean, the sanitary crisis already marked the entrance, the true one, into the 21st century. You know, we are in a digital society very much more. So we launched that, and we also thought that we needed to set up like a global ecosystem. So we wanted to work with the European groups, we work with Canal, but also we set up quickly partnerships with YouTube, the social networks, and then Tencent. And in 2021, in terms of figures, with our platform, with our own platform, we have 1 million unique visitors. I'm not talking about the website. And with the global system, independently of what the houses do with their own websites and social networks, we reach with YouTube and Tencent something like 1 billion views, which we didn't expect that. So we are happy with that. We're glad. I also say when we have 1 billion, so my team say 1 billion, it's great. So I say, yes, it's wonderful, but let's keep humble. I mean, if you look at a great son of Rihanna, I mean, it's more. So let's, but it's for fashion. I mean, I think globally it's great. And I had a call yesterday just before taking the plane of a video that we made. A short one for a brand in the Fashion Week. And in general, we have that's on Instagram. And in general, we have let's say 50,000, 100,000 views. And then for any reason, I don't know, she told me they wanted they said it was a pity we were not with each other, because we could have some kind of champagne with each other, because we had like 23 million figures. I mean, we never had that. But that is probably exceptional, or maybe a statistical mistake of Instagram. I don't know.
I don't think so, but but then you think that fashion weeks, traditional fashion weeks, are still worthy, or that this global platform, or that they are going to be living both of them together?
No, I think Fashion Week has been discussed and has been, but it's even more obvious that it needs to happen. But now what we see is that the Fashion Week as a professional event is even more felt as absolutely mandatory by all the stakeholders of the fashion, because there are several things. Like first, the emotional and the neurophysiological factors make that it is different, and the notion, this notion of metaverse, visualization, yes, but it remains still, for many technical and scientific reasons I have no time to expose here, but it is different. And also the notion of physical empathy is also different, and the fact that the professional, the spontaneous also meetings, we were discussing about that, and were telling me about that just before this morning, before we talked. And that is also very important. People meet with each other, but at the same time, the platform for those who cannot come, let's say, for instance, like in Asia, much better now, but it's not, well, we are still in the context of, the sanitary crisis is not over, obviously. And also for all the people all the young and not young, the people who professionals who are not here, who are not present at the Fashion Week, and for all the people who are passionate, they can look at that. And so it's B2C, but saying B2C, I prefer to see business to citizen as business to consumers, because there's also this aesthetic dimension. And what has happened, which is remarkably interesting, is that now in the Fashion Week, because of the digital, now there is a second scene, which is in the street. Just to get in a show, I go from a show to another one, as you've done, as you know, but then sometimes it's so crowded. It's more like going to a hip-hop concert. I mean, it's just amazing, because with all the people and the VIPs being there, all the people, the young people just being have a huge enthusiasm. For one of the show, I just couldn't approach, and because I'm tall, so I was recognized, and the government security came to take me with a whistle just to cross the crowd so that they couldn't do the show. That was the banana show. But that is very striking, and it is strong, and it shows also how important it is, and the embodiment, the community around the brands and the designers, and so this is it has echoed, and it remains, and it will remain. It makes the calendar even more complex, because you have pre-recorded videos, live shows, you have kind of post-recorded, post-production, which can delay a little bit, and my guess is that it has brought and it brings what I called augmented creativity. In the same way we talk about augmented reality, augmented creativity, meaning now you have more and more important role, not only of photographs, but like always, but also like of movie directors, creative digital designers, and of course video game creative people. So this is stimulating.
Yeah, for sure, it's a transformation moment. No?
But we need to innovate, because if we don't innovate, I mean, things can go very quickly. It's just to be on the edge. It is very challenging, because saying okay, like in our case, for instance, we are Paris. This is fine. The big brands and things, and the young brands. So everything will be okay, and the better scenario is not to do much and not to move ahead. That doesn't work. It doesn't work anyhow under any circumstances in our world, and that's quite difficult for quite a number of, let's say, somehow people, I mean, who don't want so much to change. But that's another thing. It's a political thing, and a societal thing. But in fashion, I mean, the fact of changing is absolutely in the essence of fashion by itself. So it's more natural. But we always have to need to innovate in education, to innovate in terms of methods, to innovate in terms of also the brands, information systems, you see, and to articulate all that in a global view, holistic view of like positive and innovative attitude. It's a bit general what I just said, but I think it's I feel this as important.
No, totally. You have mentioned the brands, the international brands that come to Paris, but at the same time, it's also very important how the French brands sell to the world. So in fact, I have this figure here that the 50 largest French companies in fashion have an export rate of 80% on average. And I mean, this is very, very interesting for us in Spain, because it's, of course, a challenge and an important goal. If you look back in history, which would be the key moments in the development of French fashion that have created that solid export rate nowadays?
I think, you have several business models, and I say several different professional organizations, but I would say like the development of couture by itself, and then, ready to wear of designers in the 50s and 60s when like Saint Laurent and also the other brands and Givenchy and others developed their ready-to-wear gradually. But then at that time, and Dior, of course, and then and Chanel. Well, I could take all of them, so I'm not we're not time. But then the approach, the business model has been during a long time founded on licensing. And if you live in a world which is sort of split, you can live with licensing. But then the image of the brand can be different because the products can be different. And in the 80s, that was 90, that was no more possible. And then you had I would say the supply chain also methods which change a lot. You have brands which have been very successful in doing that, and so that was also an important time. I remember very well in the 90s how it changed and how like for instance the former Yves Carcel, president of Vuitton, saying that behind the design and creativity, also in leather goods and fashion, there was a very strong supply chain which mattered. So the not visible face of the part of the iceberg. And then, of course, the development of the luxury groups has been like important, and it has been like also very successful. And the internet, I mean, it has changed. Well, what I say is a bit basic. I mean, it's just like the same. Let's say it has been the same transformation factor, but in a different, maybe in a different way. And each time it was like strong with a strong strong impulse. And one of a big challenge now. We are experiencing the digital revolution and the sustainable development revolution, and it is very important to embrace all that, and the sustainable revolution, and to do it so that creative fashion is very much also ahead, doing that. So working on that. And so this is something that matters a lot for us, and for which not only the younger brands, but the brands are very much committed. And also what we decided, that was in 2019, was to set up an eco-design tool for the shows, because there are not many things for events, and we have done that with a consulting company, which is PwC. But it is an open tool that will be open innovation, and we are implementing it. But that's, I would say, beyond French fashion and beyond Paris. I mean, this is very much, let's say, a global mutualization. I mean, sustainable development challenge overcome like everything and every competition or co-petition.
And what is the relationship that the Federation establishes with the French government and with the public authorities to develop all
there has been we have strong relationships with the French government, but also there is a committee which gathers all the Federation, also the leather goods, and because we could have we concentrate very much on our job and what we do. We work for the Fashion Week, the Couture Week. Also, we bring services to our members. We also work as a think tank, but we cooperate with the other organization, and we exchange very regularly with the Ministry of Economics and the Ministry of Culture. There has been a great Minister of Culture in the early 80s and the 90s, Jacques Lang. And he played a very important role because he he contributed to help to support like fashion and the fashion designers opening the Louvre, la Cour Carrée, opening the space of the Louvre to the fashion designers. So that was very important, and there has been this tradition. So there is, I would say, very regular dialogue, and we also had like the French president, so Emmanuel Macron, has also committed himself in a very, very, very strong way, organizing 2 dinners with the fashion designers from all over the world of the Paris scene, like in 2018, 2020, 17 or 18 and 20. So I mean, it's just the fact of organizing a dinner. It's not by itself a supporting policy, but at least it's a globally. It witnesses, let's say, the way we are interacting. But to say that also, we also always have, like with the administration and the public organization, to dialogue, because fashion can be also seen as something which is not precisely an art and which is not functional in an engineering way. It's not a question of a need, it's a question of a desire. And that makes a big difference. And just that needs to be reanimated, to give rise to an explanation. This is where you explain the importance also of the for the economy, and also globally for the society. And this is also why sustainable development is very important, because fashion is sometimes seen as accused as being one of the main, the worst like industries, with figures which can be discussed, because there is a lack of scientific methodology in developing all that, and we work on that, of course. And so this is on that also we need to be very proactive, and we try to be, and also with the Fashion Institute, for which we gave a strong impulse also in the last years. So
yeah, education has always been part of your own career, of course, but also of the work of the Federation through the French Institute. And how, I mean, what is the relation that you can establish between the investment in education and the, let's say, that what you get by the economical impact of the industry?
I mean, education is fundamental, just for the young, for like training and education by definition of the young generations, and also for like continuous education and training. So it's we as I said, we are in a knowledge. It has always been important in the let's say, and more important in the 16th and 17th century and so on. But we are clearly in a knowledge economy, and it goes very quickly. And also the young people who are well educated can also teach a number of things, including in digital matters, and also convince all the older generations to work and to act really and strongly for planet and for sustainability. So that is very important. You will have also a presentation of the British situation with the University of the Arts. I remember very well when this project was developed after just after creative industries. It's not up to me to speak about that, but it was considered in the Tony Blair government as being a high priority. And in our case, the French Fashion Institute was very much was centered around fashion management. And it worked and developed, I can say, quite well with a number of alumni. The question is the alumni. The alumni are in all these houses, like CEO or marketing directors or merchandising, collectioning, and also some of them designers also. But then the federation, we had a school, and this school had been created in 1927, the École de la Chambre Syndicale de la Couture, it had been the school of Yves Saint Laurent, Karl Lagerfeld, Valentino, so prestigious. But we needed to change, because a federation is not an academic organization, and shouldn't be an academic organization. So we gave the school to the French Fashion Institute, which has the design and management and know-how part, and with big investment for the campus, supported by the state, and also the big groups gave a lot of money for the development. So that has been very important, and it has been a key factor of the strategy, which had been defined before I arrived. I got back to fashion, but that was one of my first, I would say, missions, to do that with all as the collective work. So this is extremely important, and it is also very important that in such cases to do so that the schools are recognized institutionally in the whole system. But there are also other fashion schools in France, and concerning the business school, I've been the dean of during 6 years, which is the SCP, which has developed a lot in a European way, and I was happy also to do that, always also for European humanistic convictions. There is also a great campus in Madrid, not far from here, which has been great developed by my dear colleague Annie Medina, who is still a member of the board and an academic advisor of the Federation. And I'm sure the school, ESCP, which is very well ranked and so on, with other universities and School of Arts, can contribute to an educative project for fashion in Spain. I mean, you have so many, like, you have Cristobal and Nueve, and you have also, and also in other ways, the role of Inditex and the Mango, and I'm thinking of the designers. We do have a Teza in our official calendar. We had also like Paloma Spain and others. And I could mention, I know the names, and this is, I'm thinking of Juan Martin and others, but this is, it's difficult to mention only some of them because mentioning them means that I don't quote the others, but you have.
Don't worry, nobody's going to get offended.
But it's always important to be respectful to any of them. but you have also this power, and I think it's important. And I'm sure that Carlo will agree with me, said that it's important that Spain is developing and that we have a strong Spanish ecosystem to develop with each other.
What potential do you see in the Spanish fashion?
You know, I think it's.
What do you think are the strengths that you can?
No. I think there is first. Spain has a very high artistic and aesthetic and designers' power, and this is one thing, and this is the foundation, because it's the fashion designers cannot be disconnected. It has to be seen in a global way. When you see the fashion designers are extremely motivated and linked, like, to museums and to art and to contemporary art and design, and this move has always been strong in Spain. I remember very well the great times of the Movida. I remember all the designers. I know exactly the role. Thinking of Javier Mariscal, and his brother was a student of IFM in the 90s, and then the development of Dominguez and so on, and all that designers. So there is this power, but which needs to be supported of course with the government, but not only the government. They say the global ecosystem. And then Spain also developed global leaders with Inditex and its brands, and of course Zara. I remember And when I went to see quite a number of years ago, maybe more than 20 years ago, I was for the first time in La Coruña because I was an advisor for Morocco, and at that time China was getting into WTO, so we wanted to preserve Morocco and Tunisia, and I know that there was also that the designer's spirit. And I remember having seen Monsieur Ortega in the offices, like a product manager, like all the others, and so on. But I think that it's not up to me to say that, but the Mango, of course, and others, and Corto Inglés, they can also maybe, I'm sure they this power of supporting, I don't know, but I think what I mean by that is that every country has its identity, and it's important to cope with the global world and to be in the nowadays challenge while coping with the strength of the city and the country. The British Fashion Council has a different structure than the one that the camera has or that we have, which are quite similar. But so the strength has to can foster what can be done. There must be the only thing which matters is the collective intelligence and the collective strength, and that's the job of the federation here. That's our job. But I think this is the most important. Like you have like a scientific collective strength, or in R&D, or in any aspect, or a political one when it works. When the political strength is like between the European countries is weakening, we see what's happening. So that must be cultivated, and just to try to overcome the differences, and to have a strong challenge and do that. But I know that Spain always had initiative. I remember some years ago, I had the visit that was more than. I should stop giving example of 20 or 30 years ago. I think, but it's just a little bit depressing. But I know that like schools, I remember with ISEM, which has developed, and with Combandoga, who she came to see me, and I came to Madrid at that time, and I was, how do you say that, the padrino of a cohort so I always, among the others, wanted to support what would happen here.
Let's put a kind of an example. Let's say that I am a young designer, or not young, a small designer, independent designer, and I want to start my own business in French. I'm French. What sort of tools would I have? Where can I look for investment? What kind of financing help or support can I get? I mean, how does it work for somebody that wants to start the business?
The most important point before the fact of having to find money or go to private equity thing is just to see that there is the kind of like a theorem. I don't know if it's a law of a theorem, but a designer has to express its creativity, and more and more nowadays also in terms of like communication, because of this is so much linked. Creativity by itself, without a communicative approach, and a creative communicative approach is more difficult. So that's the main thing. And like a designer is just like a small sun surrounded by satellites, and has to bring an array and to be bright. In a way which is sort of attracting a community with the talent, the creative talent, and that is important. And some designers, it's maybe easier to express the talent, just to speak, to come when you interview them. It's better that they can express the talent, but not doing that. But some are discreet. It depends. It's creative identities. But the most important point is that after, let's say, a certain amount of turnover, And if it's, let's say, if we reach, I don't know, something like 2 or 3 million, so even 1 million, 2 millions, it's very important that there is a second person just getting in. Like you can, not necessarily a commercial person, but somebody like a manager, somebody bringing another kind of rationale. And let's say you can have a warm source and a cold source, and a balance. And this is key. This has all. There are some exceptions, but very few. And that is important, because when it just going to discuss with the banker, or with the fund, the designers himself or herself is not seen as having a financial or managerial credibility. So that balance is very important. This is crucial. And then Fashion Week is not mandatory. There are other business models, there are other ways. But in case it's done, it has to imply some kind of expenses. That it's difficult to put a general rule on that. And after a certain time, the designers can apply to the Paris Fashion Week, or to the Milan Fashion Week, or to the London Fashion Week, just to be seen. And of course the fashion weeks here, it's important too, just to be seen. But then the financial matters have to be solved. But the financial matters can be solved if the good foundations are set up. But the notion of the artistic, the specific way fashion designers and fashion week take place is important. For instance, in Paris, we have like fairs, but it's very distinct. But at the same time, we have a partnership with the fair, which is Tranda, because we want to support that fair, and we have a partnership with Première Vision. But it's a global ecosystem. But designers' brands and designers' fashion has to be, let's say, recognized, identified as something like as an entity, which is the case with ACME. And thank you again, ACME. And thank you again to the president, and thank you again to Pepa for inviting me and inviting us here. So, but that is important. And then, there is this new entrepreneurial scene. Many startups, of course, it's easier to get no money when you have a tech startup and when you imagine some kind of an app and technical development, but a digital development. But then the players of the brands have to also to be convincing, and there is also a young, let's say, financial and banking ecosystem with young entrepreneurs who know exactly what fashion is, because they are like fashion. I mean, it's anywhere. I was like listening to one of the last songs of Rosalia, and where she quotes so many fashion brands. I mean, this is in the air, and we are not in an isolated planet, you see.
It's interesting that you touch on fair trades. If I'm not wrong, there are like 27 fairs in Paris. 75% of the brands that actually show there are foreign, going back to this idea of Paris as a global window for fashion. And fashion shows are very relevant. They reach around 40 million euros in altogether, but then fairs get 700 million. So which is the relationship between Fashion Week and fairs, and how the two nurture each other or compete, or what sort of...
Fairs have a commercial role. Mm-hmm. Fashion weeks have not only a commercial role. So I made an article for the Future Books of IFM, for Fashion Institute. I felt like doing that paper, because at that time, during the pandemic, the fashion weeks were criticized. So then I decided something like the 6 C's. So you have it hasn't been published yet, but you have the commercial role, the communicative role, which is extremely important, let's take the case of big brands which have their own retail, which don't make wholesale, only internal wholesale. They don't need to show they don't sell to retailers. They sell to themselves, but it's a huge communicative role. And so commercial and communicative and it's a creative expression. A show for a designer, it's like theater. It's a piece of theater behind the curtains. It's theater. And now we have cinema with the videos, you see. We have both, we have theater and the cinema. If you say to a designer, he will not show or she will not show, it can be a show with défilé, or it can be also a presentation, but if not, they can be like depressed. At the moment they want to show that, and it has to connect, and then they discuss with the manager how to do that, etc. And there is also there are the three things: communicative and commercial and creative expression. The scenography. The scenography, it's like it can be sometimes. Don't remember the scenography of Karl. It was already total work of arts, even if he said that he didn't make a total work of arts, because there were some cases in which he remained modest. But that was amazing, and the scenography is important. So this is important. Shows that to show somewhere, it just, of course, it can cost money, but the fact of for a designer, for a creative soul, body and soul, just to give like an individual, or when there are two, a couple, or when it's a collective, a creative team, just to witness the way, the context, and the global set of showing, which is not only the collection. Sometimes the collections, it is so important that the collection gets forgotten. That's not good. We saw that in films. We are in fashion, but still. And then there is also this, let's say, the other factors. I'm not going to mention all that now, but it's a cultural event. Fashion shows and Fashion Week is a cultural event, which can take place in cultural location, and it's also like this notion of this configurating. There is a theory in management which is called field configurating event, and that's what's better. And also the last six, because I finally mentioned the six, is the communitarian.
You are giving us a preview of the article.
Yes, right. But don't say that to anybody, right? Before it's published. Total secret. And because it's a communitarian, because it's like a community, just like a ritual. It's a ritual. You see, the first row, isn't it a ritual? Who is going in the first row? That is, people that are passionate cannot imagine how important it is. In some years, of course, there will be the case, it will be the same thing for the avatars. Which row of the avatar in the metaverse show, along reflecting the real one. We will get to that kind of debates, but for that we need to read some not especially in fashion, but some science fiction authors like Neil Stephenson or that people.
Silicon Valley.
Neil Stephenson is the marvelous writer who invented the notion of metaverse in 1992, and the notion of avatar, by the way.
So. We are, of course, talking a lot about fashion and fashion designers, but there's also a very important part of this industry that it's artisans and craftsmanship. Yeah. And I wonder, is there a different strategy for fashion designers and artisans? Are the two of them just the same thing, the overall same thing?
Artisans, the question with artisans, artisans can wish to maintain their strictly tradition, you see, traditional work. There is also this notion of métier d'art in French, which is a French term for arts and craft. But also they are often very happy to work with designers and with creative and with designers, not only in fashion. So then I would say it depends on the collections. It depends on the nature of the creativity of the fashion designers. If it is very much linked with shoes and sneakers, different different of situations in which the most important is art and crafts and embroidery, like in a couture perspective. But for sure, the notion, we are in small series, and the notion of the link with the artisans or companies which are in between artisans and manufacturing, that is extremely important. And as I said, the more the digital goes, the more the creative designers, they do something clothes which are in general which are supposed to be worn. Not always supposed to be worn, but when they are. But then just the fact of the touching, the fabrics is extremely important. This is why also the question of how to measure durability, how to measure sustainability is so important, but that's technical debates at the French and the European level that we have. But so that is very intimate, and this is also why quite some number of designers don't want to develop so much, but want to keep this strong link with artisans, and this is also why there is in Europe, including the UK, not outside of the political matters, let's say, the link. I think of because of I was having a thought for John Ruskin and William Morris and the arts and crafts and the pre-refair lights, etc., and what it matters even today. And this is why these links are with the artisan scene is important, and this requires also the evolution of business models, pricing, etc., to consumers, to clients. But that is very important, and and also designers like to go to see the artists. They like to go to factories. In general, when they have time, just to knowing that. I'm thinking of like you design. I'm thinking of Virgil. Virgil Abloh was just traveling a lot and doing amazing things and brought a lot to society. Designers are very much in between all that societal move, artisans know-how.
Do you have specific projects or plans to promote or protect craftsmanship at the Federation?
Well, when you talk about craftsmanships, they are there are several sectors. One is like the manufacturing, and so we have links, and there is a lot of the constant dialogue with the manufacturing in the clothing industry. It's another professional organization, and we talk. We were in a meeting like yesterday morning again, and also like the same thing with leather goods and so on. That is important, also with the textile. But as I said, in the textile, there is huge, beautiful things in France, including in the silk industry and so on. But knowing that I think 80% of the textiles are just coming from Italy, so which is great. And it's very European. And the fact that Portugal is developing in manufacturing too is also a very good news.
And do you think this is an opportunity for us here in Spain?
Yes, it is. And then there is also the more like art and craft thing, more linked to couture. And then Chanel did a lot on that, and they have this new 19M places with all this métier d'art, that Le Sage and Le Marié and all that. And the other LVMH is doing also. They all play a role, and also the notion of crafts in the case of couture or creative ready-to-wear. The atelier are very important. This is very important. I remember just talking with this line with the head of knitwear at the French Fashion Institute, and he used to be a designer of knitwear for Dior in the past. And he explained the importance of the techniques and the machines of the technique. This is even more important than ever. And I remember him explaining that it's important to innovate, to know how to disrupt the functioning of the machine, to make a kind of innovation. So it's always essential to not only to reason in terms of technique, of technology, because doing that presents the big danger of sticking to functionalism. And engineers have to be very much involved in what's happening. And technology is more important than ever, with the software just governing the whole. That's the third or fourth industrial revolution. But that is not disconnected from the wish of the designers and the fact that the managers themselves keep an eye on all that to make it work. So that is important. And also another reason, if we do that on the management side, it's important just for the link with the subcontractors in any aspects, and because it's it's all that moves for having traceability, you see, and for having also sustainable development measurement, because everything now is like data and metrics, so we need metrics. So all that has to be connected. This is why it's a big work. But also thinking of Hermès. Hermès, they are maybe one of the most important employers for the in textile with the silk industry and so on. But that has always to be worked. Nothing is ever not established. It has to be always questioned and going further. So I think that what you question for Spain, yes, it is important. It's important that that Spanish is strong in terms of like brands and emerging brands, and also this linked and all this coping with the let's say Spanish identity and Spanish aesthetics, but in connection with the whole world. You know, there's this line saying like, all business school, which is thinking globally and acting locally, but it's more modern in a way to say thinking locally and acting globally, and that's for international designers' brands the key.
So it's about craftsmanship, but with a layer of innovation applied into it. So it's not only preserving old techniques, but also challenging them to evolve and move ahead and develop maybe more efficient and better process.
Yeah, look at what in some cases even like Iris van Herpen did in Couture. She's now a corresponding member in Couture. And she was very much into like additive manufacturing, etc., etc. Now she's extending. So all this it depends, of course. It can be more traditional in terms of technology, but it's always the fact of coping with the world, coping with the transformation. And I think that fashion could give a lot of lessons to many other sectors of the industry, by the way. I'm not talking about the French thing here, thinking globally altogether.
Well, I think that we are going to open the turn for some questions from the audience. If there is someone that wants to ask you something.
Because I think with Carlo, with all the topics that we're discussing with each other, and all that.
We've covered a lot, but we have a question here.
Thank you for such an interesting discussion. Hello, yes. I am looking at, you talked earlier about the very healthy export figures for French fashion and the fact that that had been based on couture and also prêt-à-porter. And my question really relates to the fact that at some point there would have been a conscious decision to determine that this was an economic area that needed capitalizing upon and growing. And I'm interested in perhaps you expanding on that a little bit more in terms of how that decision was made and who was behind it and what happened. Because obviously we're looking at long-term development. You make a decision now and it reflects in the economy maybe in 10 years, 20 years later. So the fruits that we are collecting now somehow are from the seeds that we planted many years ago. And again, if we're looking at the future of the fashion ecosystem, what is it that we need to decide and what sort of support mechanisms need to be in place in order to have a healthy industry in 20 years' time? So if you could tell us a little bit about the French model in that term, would be great.
Okay, I can talk, yeah, we talk about that, but you know, knowing that all this is very international, there's nothing which is specifically French. It's maybe one thing, but which could be a similar by itself. I will mention that. But I mean, when I'm talking about thinking of Love, which is a marvelous like Spanish brand, which is owned by LVMH, and with a great designer, J.W. Anderson. So all that is intertwined. So let's say for now, what we can say is that, of course, they are the big groups have like facilities just to develop because they can invest on brands and they can watch the new models and invest on brands and so on, etc. That's for sure. Not especially the French ones. I mean, the biggest ones are in France. But there are like others, like including Puig here, who invested in Dries Van Noten, if I'm not wrong, and also with Paco Rabanne and Narici, independently what they do in perfumes. So it's globally. But the point is that, you know, in this industry, like in any industry, there are new business models. If you look at some successful stories coming from Paris, starting in Paris in the last years, we had, in that case, it's French brands. We have Jacques Mus, also, and Marine Serre. I'm not going to talk about the turnover here, but they did well, and with new, I would say, exploring new ways for development. I'm going to tell you something. When we launched the online fashion week, I was wondering, and I said, well, these young brands, young designers, I mean, they're these clothes designers or fashion designers, and now they're going to be like make movies. They will not have, I know the cost, the production cost for movies, and I know how are they going to do that? Because we give some money, but not much. What will happen? And my team told me, but you should not worry, because they have all this community of the creative class, just gathering, and I remember having like talks with, like, say, from students, alumni from the St. Martin School, and also some in fashion and some other in digital, like design and other things, and art. So there is also this opening for new business models. So in a way, to me, it's important just to keep this in a creative and entrepreneurial, although we cannot talk so much, I mean, we cannot see, I mean, fashion designers are not really entrepreneurs. They are at the beginning, but if they consider themselves as entrepreneur, that can be also dangerous, as I said. They see the alter ego, who can be. I think it's important now to identify the new business models, and and everything can be fragile. We can see China is a big market, but then there is this crisis, this pandemic, this crisis, sanitary problems, and so on. So that we live in a world of uncertainty. But the most important thing to me is to explore the new way of being creative, and to explore that also with the young generation. I don't say it's always the key thing, because like in the case of Paris, when you see in the 90s and 10 years after the early century, there are not so many brands. It's not so much in Paris that the new brands emerged at that time. Isabelle Marant did, but not so many. No, it's a different time. But I think we have to explore these new business models, because in a way, we need a lot of money. The digital real estate is extremely costly, and that requires a lot of money. But in another sense, it's also the fact of being well known, of having a high community on Instagram, of linking the different arts. Like I'm thinking of Combe, this great designer. He's based in New York with Kid Super. He's doing, I mean, just to look at the videos he does, just like looking at a small, like Tarantino style movie, and he's built up something which is a kind of a small Warholian factory, and just supporting like hip hop singers. So that was in Brooklyn, but that is possible. This is possible in Paris. I said that because it's showing in Paris, but this has to be deepened, because the digital is costing more and more. But then the point is also, you look when you are on Instagram, the way when the algorithm of Instagram will change again, it can change the conditions. It can make it more difficult in a way. But the fact of knowing how to act on YouTube, to act on Instagram, to act on the social networks is also important, but without losing the creative sense of the collection. But I think modernity is here too, and we can explore that, and finding money is essential, but it is essential to accompany a specific model by itself. And every, like the departments have to reinvent themselves, etc., etc. So we are in a change. We are expanding an industrial revolution. This is exactly what's happening. So we have new players, new type of successes. We are very far now from the time where there will be the link with the links which have to be explored with the digital and the tech scene. Exactly we have to look at what's happening now in the Silicon Valley, and also the link between the platform, the power of the platforms, the success of Farfetch. I could say many things. You see, has been also been very, very innovative. So there is money around, and it's easier, indeed, to find money for technological projects and tech projects, or looking like tech projects, than for designers in general. But it is possible just like to act, and the attitude has to be positive for finding new business models. So the most important is to see what will change in this, what is changing in the world, and we have the chance to live this revolution now, with all these difficulties. So that answers.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question there.
But I don't forget the government and the states, right? I'm not like a libertarian. Not at all. On the contrary.
I have another question. In line with this, even if we innovate in communication, marketing, and technology, let's say, we still have to do collections, luxury collections, which are very costly. Still have to hire people, which are very costly as well. Artisans, you have to pay the people that does embroideries. So how do you in France face the problem for independent brands of the scale? Because they need to keep doing collections, meaning that they need to keep having funds in order to support their collections and their clients, wholesale. They need to keep on in there. Even, I would say, the luxury brands, they are not so dynamic at buying independent brands anymore. They seem to have taken different directions. So what is your opinion about that?
Well, first, there's something I forgot to say, the question with fears. I mean, as I say, we have partnership, but with everything that we say, it has to be like two different things with connections. This is my perception. This is how we work. So now the point, in our case, we have a I can say what we do, and answer more generally. We have set up a few years ago an emerging brands department we didn't have. So we have two very experienced people, giving like advices, constant advices on that, and trying to help also for the connection with the banks, with the investors, and so on. So we do that, and but you are true to say that the most important is the collection, not just to the beginning of the financing, but then when it is starting, it is difficult in the beginning just to find money, maybe with the family and the people around the community around to start with. There is always like a community. But then it's very important to define the type of the business model. Is that because, I mean, like for instance, fashion weeks are not necessarily the best thing. Sometimes we tell brands, should not hurry for that. And if you could make a presentation but not a show, it's going to cost you 80,000 euros minimum. Don't spend the money with that. Do other stuff. And there are also other entrepreneurial models. So it depends on that. It depends also the dream of the designers of what he or what she want to do. And then prices. I listen to the national word here. The prices are very important. In our case, we have the Andam Award, we have the LVMH Award, we have the Festival of Hier, which the Festival of Hier, the founder, he was supported by Didier Grambach, a great figure, who was the president of the federation, but he started from nothing, and then it became like a very important festival, and through like an entrepreneurial, like a Jean-Pierre Blanc, who was working for the city hall of the city there. So that is important, that to gather. It doesn't solve it like in any aspect. I mean, they need the cost of the collection, but that's like the basic financial thing. But the most important thing is to be surrounded, to be helped, to be surrounded, and then at the moment, just to be, depending on the business model, to be connected. You see, it's difficult to say more because then it would depend on the collection. It would depend on the situation of the designers himself or herself. But you are right to say that the fundamental thing is the collection. You cannot start collaboration immediately and making money that before having a collection and an identity. I see. There is one designer, Jeanne Friot, who was not well known, but she managed. She studied in IFM, but in another school in France. And she applied, and she was selected to enter into the presentations. But she managed to do that without having any means. But she did that, and she was also made some money as a stylist for photographs. So she made some money with that. So, I mean, if we talk about the young creative class has an imaginative power. And then we can arrive and support somehow the way we can do and connect. And in our case, our department watches 60 to 80 brands all over the world to see what's happening, and then we can make some decisions and so on. So that's it.
Thank you. We have another question here. Yes.
I'm in your academic, with your academic background and your insight into what motivates young people to want to join the fashion industry in France in particular, and what do you see from the new generation, the Gen Z, who are now with you, and secondly, I'm really interested in career development, whether corporations and brands really take young people seriously in recruitment and in career development. Do they pay them well? What are the conditions like in France? And what about are they listened to when? I mean, you've talked a lot about the new generation who are digital natives, I suppose. But do you think that the owners of brands actually do listen to the change that's coming from this generation?
Okay, first you can go to fashion through many ways and many, but there's always a connection with creativity and brands and itself. myself, I'm an economist, and I came to fashion because I was identified as an economics and academics, a young academic developing programs, but I'm also a musician. At that time I was playing keyboards in a rock band, a new wave band, so I came. So fashion was a kind of synthesis, I would say, in my own life, but that's true for many people, many people. So, I mean, fashion, I mean, in France, fashion is quite attractive. Let's say fashion and creative industries. I talk with like some days ago. I was in a dinner for a big event on sustainable development, and I met a good friend of mine who is not the dean of HEC, who is another of this one of these great smartest business schools in France, but not settled in Madrid. And he told me we are developing a lot of programs with creative industries. We said we would talk about that. So let's say creative industries globally are more generally recognized as a strong asset for developed countries, doing something like maybe 50% of the GDP globally, and sometimes and even more if we include tourism and things. So that is important, and fashion is very attractive. And of course, like in Paris, or for students from all over the world, the fact that there's this big brand, Fashion Week, and the big and this let's say this great dynamics is attractive, and also in terms of recruitment. The point is the recruitment. The most difficult here in our country is recruiting also for the industry, for manufacturing. There is a need for young entrepreneurs in manufacturing, and for artisans and so that. But then at the same time, you can have like people having a great career in business and just changing. You be a banker and then just stopping and everything and wanting to open a bakery or to be a cook. Many of them. So all this is once again sort of upside down, but it is attractive. And in the case, of course, of the let's say the French industry or the industry settled in Paris and around, there are like many jobs for young executives, and that comes quite up to now, quite naturally, and even for smaller brands, so young managers accompanying and working with designers. I could take many examples. And concerning the digital revolution, I think it goes very quickly now. The point is, then when you are, let's get back to this notion of creative class. When it was like founded by Richard Florida, I was quite skeptical, but I was wrong to be skeptical, because I think it's very much this what's happening. And then the ecological class and the creative class, all of this interacting with the young generations, talking about that in the bars, in the city, in big cities, and they're just and just mixing, working on that, and just taking a good time, or working very hard in startups and others. So in the past, let's say the technology, it was more like separated with the designers. Now it's more linked, because you are also like quite a number of creative people in the software industry. But at the same time, the fact of recruiting, let's say, a number of people just in a small company or SME or big one, with the high tech talents and knowing how to code, and just great geek talents, and just that will not mix up in such a natural, immediate way with young merchandisers and creative designers and so on. So there is a big HR challenge. But let's say at the same time, they know it's more, things are getting more natural. And for the Gen Z, they're more and more will have their own entrepreneurial creative project, or sometimes linked to the creative scene, but not necessarily to fashion design itself, but linked with the creative scene, and they will work working with each other. And the fact is how you can have a multi-generations model in big companies or in small companies. But I can see that it is moving very quickly now, very quickly. Same thing as for the environment and CSR challenge. So there has been a big acceleration. And the COVID crisis has been horrible, terrible, but for sure it has accelerated the digital revolution by 10 years. 10 years in any aspects. So that's a big change, and it's another stimulating that not always people so much realize in the global society in what's happening. And fashion is very much ahead. Look at fashion networks. I mean, Instagram, TikTok now. Fashion is leading the way, paving the way for all that. So I think this is we are at the end of the beginning, but this is very much where we are now, I think.
Thank you. So I think we've run out of our scheduled time. I don't know if there's one last question. Otherwise, we will be stopping for a coffee break. And I will thank you very, very much for...
I tell you something. It is very pleasant because in general, panels have panels. But here, I feel like being here, speaking like in some kind of an academic seminar. Just thinking we have time to discuss with each other. We are running for 3 days seminar with specific questions. Not so usual. It's great. I mean, at least I don't know if it's pleasant for you. It's pleasant for me. I know. I'm very glad to have the dear chance to have the time now to listen to in length my dear friend Carlo. It's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm delighted that you enjoyed it.
Thank you.